look at crow pose, we have a couple things that we need to have primed and ready to help us access this posture, Bakasana. So having depth through our hip flexor is going to be important. And since it's an arm balance, we're going to come into the arms, especially the shoulders, as well as having the core strength to keep ourselves light. So we're going to jump right in and we'll find our way onto our mats in a child's pose. So taking our knees and separating them if that's comfortable for you at the start. Big toes glued together, walking the hands out in front, lengthening. Go ahead and start by having some engagement running through the arms. Keep those elbows lifted. Just settling into our breath. Take a few moments here. Lengthening out the spine. As you inhale, exhale, sending the sit bones down towards the heels, making contact with the forehead to your mat. Your last respiration. Gripping into your hands, use your fingertips starting from the very beginning. Rising up, we'll find a tabletop position, tucking the toes under. Pressing into your toe beds. Raising the knees away from the mat, we'll start here with just a small hover. Find a nice straight long line of your spine. Getting ready to shift back, finding your first downward facing dog. Lifting the hips. Ears come nestled between the upper arms. You can walk out your feet. Finding stillness here. We'll roll forward, finding a plank pose. Keeping your legs active, pressing down into your feet, pressing the ground away with the palms, gripping the mat with your fingers. Possibly trying an extended plank position here, walking the palms one at a time slightly further away from the toes. Keep the wrap of the triceps gripping the earth with the fingers. Possibly moving your toes a little bit further away, backing up slowly, baby steps. Finding a nice long line of the spine. Try to prevent the V situation from happening. Keep this in a plank position. Softness through the abdomen enough to accept your breath. One to two more breaths. Slowly walking the toes slightly closer, bringing the wrists back underneath your shoulders, wrapping the triceps once again, nice strong support of the arms. Shifting the hips up and back into a downward facing dog once again. We're going to step forward, bringing right foot to the right thumb, lower the left knee down, small Anjaneyasana. Squaring your hips, keep some integrity here, pressing down. You can float your back knee up. Finding Anjaneyasana, float your back knee up here. Maybe you raise and lower a little bit, keeping those outer hips engaged, tailbone reaching down for stability. Hands come down, frame the front foot, step back, find your downward facing dog. We'll roll forward to plank. Exhale, chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Left foot, left thumb, stepping forward. Right knee taps down. Inhale the arms up, Anjaneyasana. Floating the back knee up once again, hips stay engaged, tailbone reaching long. Maybe you add a little bit of that up and down movement. Coming down, frame the front foot, step back, downward facing dog. Vinyasa, if you want to flow it out, exhale, chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog, downward facing dog. Stepping forward, right foot, right thumb, left knee taps down, shift the hips back in space here. Half Hanumanasana. Right toes up towards the ceiling, pressing fiercely down through your right heel. Hips stay even with one another. You can bring blocks in here or use your fingertips tented. Shifting the weight back forward, stepping back straight to plank pose here. You can vinyasa or straight to downward facing dog. Left toes, left thumb. Right knee taps down. Shifting the hips back in space, half Hanuman, left leg forward. Left toes up towards the ceiling, pressing down into your left heel. Shifting forward, we'll go straight to a plank pose. You can go back to downward facing dog or vinyasa. Rolling forward to plank once again. Adding a little bit more intensity to our plank pose. Taking your right hand, stepping it forward just slightly. Separating the feet away from one another, about hip distance apart. Transferring the weight onto the right hand. Then possibly floating your left hand. See if you can maintain everything about your posture the same. Still pressing into both legs. Maybe you float up the right toes as well. Slowly left hand comes down, right toes float back down. Shifting the weight onto the left hand. See if you can maintain everything the same, not shifting your hips too far to one side. Tent the right fingertips. Maybe take the right hand out in front of you. Maybe you're able to float up the left toes as well. Slowly, right hand comes down, left toes float back down to your mat. You can bend the knees, shift the hips back for one child's pose, nestling the upper body in as close as you can to your thighs. Maybe you let the forehead come down. Your sit bones are reaching towards your heels. Taking a little bit of a moment here to actively engage into your child's pose. So pressing into the tops of your feet. Hug your sit bones with your abdominals down towards your heels. So really lifting the navel up towards the spine, squeezing the thighs and the chest into one another. Maybe you let your head come away from the mat just slightly, lifting the back of the head away, hugging the thighs into the chest. Maybe both hands float back by the heels. Keeping this squeeze of the thighs into the chest. We're going to try for a Lilasana here. So a pendant pose, bringing the hands on either side of the thighs. Keep that squeeze of or either side of the knees, rather, a little bit further back than fingertips in line with the knees. Keep that squeeze of the thighs in towards the chest. Take one nice breath in here. Exhale. On your next inhale, keep the thighs squeezed towards the chest. Press the ground away. Maybe the toes stay in contact, seeing how high you can lift the knees. Keep them close to the chest. Keep them close to the chest. Keep them close. Slowly coming back down. So coming up towards the front of your mat, or I'm going to take a little bit of a sideways approach here. Separating the feet hip distance apart, turning the toes out to the side, bending the sit bones down towards your heels, coming into a yogi squat, malasana. You can come in hands into prayer, pressing the outer arm into the knees, squeezing the hands together with pressure coming in from the legs. So taking our blocks and bringing them in here, just having them a little bit closer by in case you'd like to use them. We're going to try flying our first crow. So there's two ways of accessing our posture here. So if you come into a deep squat with the feet about hip distance apart, sending the knees both straight forward, if you can bring your upper arm bones to the back, or the back side of your upper arm bone to the knee, you can try doing knee on the arm. So being the first method here, knee on the arm, rising up onto your tiptoes, keep your tight shape. You can lift the hips. As you do, you'll notice your hands come down towards the earth. Lifting the hips, grabbing the earth, gripping your mat, use your fingertips here, and see how it feels to just shift your weight forward onto the palms. So taking this as our first step, just rocking forward and back, shifting the weight, almost like you're walking, transferring your weight from one foot to the other. So as we fly or come closer to flying our crow pose, thinking of this as a weight transfer as opposed to just, okay, I have to be on my hands, will help make the transfer a little bit more gradual. Therefore, our body will be a little bit more receptive, and we can really sense our weight and our balance in the palms, as opposed to just trying to throw all of our weight on them super quickly by just lifting our feet. So taking that moment to play with the transfer of shifting, lifting the hips first, shifting our weight forward, gripping with the fingertips. Maybe you come a little bit closer. Maybe you just turn the toenail beds down towards the earth, flipping the toes back under. Shift the weight back towards the feet, coming back forward, transferring from feet to hands, slow transfer, slow transfer. Maybe the toes fly up, maybe they stay down, maybe you try lifting one at a time here. Maybe you lift one, then the other, do a little transfer in the air, but keeping the toes there for a little bit of support. If fear comes in and there's a little bit of a, I'm going to fall on my face, being scared, you have a couple options, one being a block, two being a pillow. You can always bring a pillow in. My favorite used to be a couch cushion. I would take a couch cushion and place it on my mat so that if I was going to tip forward, my face had a very nice soft landing surface there, so I never ended up with a smushed or rug burn on my nose. So that's one option. The other option would be actually placing a block and starting on the block and working in reverse to where we would lift up from the block. So taking our block, knees to the back of the upper arm bone, placing our palms down, shifting our weight forward, keep the toes in contact, but as you shift your weight forward, toes are still in contact, my forehead comes down to my block. I'm not sure I'm actually in the right placement here, so I'm going to try shifting my block a little bit forward. So replacing my palms, knees to the back of my upper arm bone, shifting my weight forward. I'm going to find my block once again with my forehead. That feels a little bit better. So from here, I can still play in the same manner, lifting my feet, maybe try one at a time. Maybe I lift both, and then I lift my head away from the block so that if I don't have my balance, my head is going to come right back down onto my block. So that's always an option. The second placement that we can try here with our legs is bringing the knees on the outside of the upper arm. So I would say that this would be helpful if when you try to lift and fly your crow, if your arms are flaring out to the side. Now you can control this with a muscular engagement, the same one that we use to wrap our triceps to the back of the room, like when we lower into chaturanga, keeping the elbows from splaying out to the sides. But sometimes we find it a little bit more difficult to maintain this engagement with the weight of the body in the arms. So if when you're coming up and trying to fly your crow, if you feel your elbows are splaying out to the side and you're having trouble maintaining this, you can take this and possibly it'll resonate a little bit better with you. So bringing the knees to the outer arm bones and hugging them in. So this will help keep our arms hugged in nicely from the outside. So using our leg strength to kind of help with the upper arms. So coming into our position here, our squat would need to be a little bit deeper to have the knees come to the outer arms. So instead of coming to the back of the arm, our arm needs to descend a little bit lower, bringing the knee outside of almost the shoulder or the upper arm. So taking our small stance, bringing our palms down, lifting the hips, keep the knees squeezing in towards the center, maybe even walk your toes to come towards the middle. Now you almost also have a shelf for the shin bone. So squeezing in, you can try transferring the weight forward in the same manner, lifting one knee at a time. Keep those knees hugging in. The only downside is that your knees could slide down the outside of the upper arm, so the core strength is important there. So something else that we can take a look at while we're working with our crow pose is where we are when we enter the posture. If you happen to be able to fly your crow pose and you're noticing that you're working very low and close to the ground, this is a sign that you might not be engaging fully through the core to help hold the weight of the body up. So as much as this is an arm balance, really the core is what helps us find that lift and that float for then our arms to come in and be the balance. So they are support the arms, but the core is what's going to support the weight of the lower body. So if we're entering into our crow and we're really low down to the earth here, you're possibly hanging in your arms. And maybe even after you're done or the next day, you show up with bruises on the back of your arms from trying arm balances. That's another good sign that we're not engaging the core and using that to help us alleviate some of the weight that's on the back of the arms. So something you can try to do is work on pretending that there's a string lifting from the back side of your body. It's attached to your navel, travels through the body, out the back of the spine, and pretend there's somebody behind you like a little marionette lifting this space. So being low in our posture here would lead to really lifting, engaging, and coming from there. Obviously, this is easier said than done, and it's something that comes with practice. Taking a moment and addressing where we can work to ameliorate our crow pose. So if you fly your crow pose and you're like, oh, getting my feet off the ground is no big deal, I do that all the time, that doesn't mean necessarily that we have that posture mastered. So finding places that we can play inside of that posture to help us strengthen, but also keep it interesting is kind of key here. So there's a couple things that I like to do that I find fun while I'm working with crow pose. So working with transitions that we can then transfer into a class are always something super helpful. So I'd say one of the first ones that I think I played around with and that I would suggest you to try is if you have a crow that's flying and you're able to find a little bit of height, you could try jumping back to chaturanga and using this to be the start of a vinyasa to finish out your flow here. So taking a look at kind of what we would do or how this would work would be coming into our crow pose, whatever that looks like for you. Coming into crow pose, seeing if you can find some height here. So the further you are away from your mat, the higher height you have, the more space you have to work with as you're looking to jump back to find your chaturanga. So pressing into the hands, sucking the navel up to the spine, seeing if you can lift the knees gently away from the upper arm and then shoot them to the back of the mat, flowing directly into your upward dog, finding your downward facing dog. So The lower we are to our mat here, the harder this transition is going to be. So possibly if you're someone who has a slightly lower crow pose, you might want to work on finding some height first, because jumping back from a lower stance, you have more space, your knees are going to be closer, you're going to drip even lower, coming into a little bit of a compromised chaturanga position. So finding that height and that lift first, and then actually continuing that lift to bring the shin or the knee away from the upper arm bone, and then send the legs and toes towards the back of the mat. You can slow this down even slower and see if you can find a little bit of a float before you send your toes to the back of the mat. So seeing if this is going to work out here, finding your crow shape, transferring the weight forward on the mat, lifting the toes up, pressing into the hands, float the knees away, send them to the back of the mat, lifting up, upward facing dog, downward facing dog. So slowing down the transition as well. If you're already shooting your legs to the back of the mat to find chaturanga, awesome. But how slow can you make that float away with the shin? Hover maybe for a second, send the toes to the back of the mat, find your chaturanga. Maybe you get a little bit closer every time to really slowing down that transition. There's a couple things we can do to spice up our playtime with crow pose. So let's see, you can do toe taps, wrist taps, push-ups, straightening the arms, coming into a straight arm crow. I think we'll take a look at those 4 to start and see how it goes. So coming into our crow pose, we've kind of already looked at these toe taps, but keeping yourself nice and high, tapping down toe, 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 toe. Maybe you do both toes at the same time, back up. That's what toe taps would look like. Wrist taps would take this a small step further. So bringing the toes to the wrists as opposed to the floor. So it really just depends on kind of where you are at in your shape of your crow pose, but you could always try adding some wrist taps in. Let's see how it's going to go for me here. So coming into our crow pose, flexing the foot, bringing it down, wrist tap, wrist tap, wrist tap, wrist tap. Maybe both at the same time. Here we go. So there's also, I'm going to say, the next step, you could go with the wrist tap, which would be pressing the weight into the hands and seeing if you can straighten the legs, bringing the knees off of the upper arm and then coming back down. So it's a full wrist tap, lifting the legs, straightening them out. We'll see if I can give you a demonstration of that as well. So coming into our crow pose, rocking the weight forward, finding your shape, bringing both toes down, lifting the hips, coming back down. So you can do this repeatedly. You can do it one time and then come down and give yourself a break. But those are all really good places to play and just kind of strengthen in your crow pose while finding something a little bit different and fun to work with. Let's see, we could also come in and take a look up at push-ups. So if you're a little bit concerned about the face plant, you could bring your cushion or your pillow back in, but we're gonna work and see how many push-ups we can get in here. If you're going to try push-ups, I suggest going with the knees on the outside of the upper arm bones and taking a slightly wider stance with the hands. So you can do a push-up, or you can try going all the way down and kissing the floor. Kissing the floor is going to be a tough option. It requires a little bit more depth to come into the shape to access it, but we'll see kind of how it goes for me today. It changes all the time. So we'll see if I can't demonstrate it for you, and maybe you can try. So bringing the palms down, knees on the outside of the upper arm bone, bringing the palms down a little bit wider than probably my traditional crow stance, really hugging my chest down, knees hugging the outer arm bones, shifting the weight forward, coming into my crow, bringing my toes together, bending the elbows, maybe my chin comes down,
kiss my mat, slowly rise back up, straightening the arms, another option, coming back down. Woo! Maybe you just work on bending the arms, straightening, bending the arms, straightening. So incorporating in our straight arm crow here in this option would be really locking the arms out, sucking that navel up, and coming into our straight arm crow. So you can do straight arm with the arms, with the knees on the back of the arm or nestled on the outside of the arm. The demonstration that I just did with the push-up was on the outside of the arm. Taking the knees to the back of the arm, coming into our crow position, and then hugging the heels as close as you can up to the sit bone, straightening the arms, coming back down. Personally, I find the knees on the back of the upper arm to be a little bit more difficult when it comes to straightening the arms because the shape you come into to straighten the arms out leaves more of the weight of the rest of the body elongated. The more of a tucked position I come into, the smaller that shape is. Also, the more I can engage my core and support it, balancing on my hands. We've taken a look at a few different ways to find shape in our crow pose, maybe fly our crow pose, even ameliorate our balance in our pose. Some fun ways to play and ameliorate our posture if it's something we already are pretty confident in flying. So I would love it if you would drop any comments below if you have any questions or need clarification on something that I've shown in this video. You can always come see me on my Facebook page as well as shoot me an email.